Can we talk about magic?
Yeah, let's talk about magic. Also, because I told you guys, right? Because I'm going to Kenya in 2 months. In 2 months, I wish, in 2 weeks. And my friend and I, we're taking a car and we're driving up north, which is basically where nobody is. It's also so funny. Like we're going to like campsites, and we're doing rooftop camping and everything. And I looked up some of the campsites, and they're like, yeah, this is not really a campsite. This is just like the wilderness, but we're marketing as a campsite. But you will also have to bring like armed rangers to protect you. We're like, okay. And it's yeah, but they're very cheap. You can find them in the next town. We're like, okay. So I'm thrilled for that.
Well, you should learn how to handle yourself first. Bring your own. Just buy a gun when you're there. Yeah, just buy a gun when you're there.
I think I would probably kill myself if I bought a gun.
So you were saying this might be one of the last episodes then of the podcast, right?
So you leave a note inside your apartment that says all my magic cards go to Matt, right?
Oh,
yeah. Especially the 20. Which kind of Matt ordered something like 20 or 30 copies of German Starter or was
Portal Ravenous Rats.
Yeah, I didn't even know that printing existed.
Exactly. So it's the pimpiest printing for pre-modern. So I wanted to make sure I had enough copies.
Yeah, because everybody knows you need like 10 copies of your what's it called? It's gonna Moneyball Black they call it, right?
Absolutely, you do.
Kind of a cool name because it's like it plays. Basically, the idea is it plays a lot of crap, but all of the crap gives you like a lot of value and synergy, kind of. But
absolutely, yeah. I mean, the format is entirely. I mean, we should actually probably start the podcast, but
I usually like to start early and then I just cut in whenever it works out. So maybe even right about now, but yeah.
Okay. Right about now, then.
Awesome. So, as we talk about like Kenya and dying in the wilderness and leaving behind my passwords so you guys can access everything. Hello and welcome to Everyday Eternal number 200. Is it 6? I want to say it's 6. Your favorite most acceptably named bi-weekly Eternal podcast. Guys, we want to do something special tonight because I feel like Legacy deserves some attention. And for as rich as the format history is, there really isn't a lot of like documentation on it, right? There's like lots of oral history, which is like its own cool thing, and I guess we're also like creating oral history now, so very fail. But this is at least documented oral history in some way. We want to look back at the history of Legacy. I want to say this is one of the most well-researched episodes we ever did, which doesn't really like. That's not a high bar to clear, I guess.
8 minutes of research as opposed to 3. So
yeah,
I think it was even 9. No, honestly, like this is very close to my heart, what we're doing tonight.
Absolutely. I dug through the archives of the source and really went deep. Really searching like what was going on. Yeah.
I mean, the listeners don't know like how many show notes we actually have per episode, but I will tell you this is like triple the amount of text
easily
in comparison to basically all the other episodes. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we might actually share the show notes. Maybe I'm actually going to share our internal recording show notes as the actual show notes for the episode.
Yeah, that's not a bad idea.
I think that could be a thing, yeah. Also, I don't think we're going to keep this one to 1 hour, but we do want to stick to like the easy to listen 1 hour. So we'll see how far we go. We'll do like a cutoff right around 1 hour, and then maybe we're going to record like a second episode later down the month.
Nice, yeah. Part B, nice. Let's go.
I think as long as we can get to 2019 for me, I'm good in that hour.
Yeah,
after that, don't give a shit, so it doesn't matter.
Cool. Dude, Matt, you know what I actually did in preparation for this episode as well?
You flipped through old cards.
I flipped through old episodes, and I flipped through the most well-researched episode we ever did, which was the one from March 2020 with you and Marius Hausmann, where we talked about the first 6 Legacy bands, because that episode provided a lot more context.
Yeah. I remember that episode.
It was great, right? That episode went really deep on like the first couple of years. So if you want to get even more information about that, go back to that. It was called the first 6 Legacy bands. Like we have no clickbait. It's just like super descriptive. I hope you guys love us for that or don't. And I picked up some of the things that I almost forgot back then. For example, like you going up to your local store and there being like a ban list on the pinboard. And you're like, oh, interesting. These cards are banned. Oh, I have to check. Like this is so different from what we have today, right? Today, you know the ban.
It's crazy because like back in the old days, like the internet existed, of course. Like it was 2004, right? It existed, but not everyone had the internet back then. I think a lot of listeners you got to think about it this way. 2004 was now coming on 22 years ago. There's people who are finishing college who weren't born yet. Like that kind of hits a little different when you think about it like that. So I mean, we were playing back then, and yeah, there was the photocopied list on the pinboard. Prices were in Scry magazine. Prices typically got updated once a month, maybe. So finding deals in the display case, things went up, things were hot. It was different. Underground Seas were $40 Canadian. Like, hey, it was a different time.
Yeah. Kai, did you play back then?
So I think like among the three of us, I think I'm the baby because I started out Legacy in 2010. And even I consider myself like one of the older players, like in the format at least. But like, dude, like you guys take it like down to a whole new level, I think.
Because, but the thing is, like, I got into the format in 2006, so Matt is like dwarfs me even more so. So he's been the OG. I'm just like a fake OG, kind of.
That's insane, 2006. Like, because that's before Tarmogoyf, right?
Yeah, yeah, that's before Tarmogoyf.
Oh,
yeah,
dude,
I remember the impact. Yeah.
This is unbelievable to me because
like to me, Tarmogoyf is like a little bit of a new card still.
So what I'll say is, so if you think about it, so like when I started, mana drain was still legal. Okay, 4-time mana drain was still a thing. Okay, so just I remember in 2003 leading into 2004 where they're like, okay, the new format's coming, things are going to change. I remember the Wizards contest for the name of the new format. I can't remember what I voted for at the time, but like I was totally fine with Legacy.
We should explain this, by the way.
Dude,
like, a lot of people actually that don't know, why did we choose 2004 as the cutoff?
Oh,
for the
okay, yeah.
Of Legacy. You want to explain that?
Yeah, so there was always Vintage, as people know as Vintage now, right? Power 9, that was basically Power 9, Mishra's Workshop, Bazaar of Baghdad, etc. That was Type 1. Also now called Vintage. Type 1.5 is basically where Power was banned, but you were playing still at the time, again, with Mana Drains and Survival of the Fittest and all these other cards. And it was an insane format. Goblins, Landstill, Solidarity. Like, it was a totally different. And I remember everyone having all these really cool cards, and a lot of people played both formats because essentially Type 1.5 was just no power. So a lot of the strategies, as long as the other cards weren't banned, of course, just came over to 1.5. So I would say that was like almost like the golden time of Vintage as well, because it's, power was cheap, people were playing, there's 2 formats, it was amazing, great. Then as kind of
and also the most interesting part is they had a linked ban list, right? Those were 2 formats, but they were linked by ban list, but in a way that we have never seen before. So you know how in Vintage cards are restricted? So what 1.5 did is, if the card was restricted in Vintage, it was banned in 1.5. And also the other way around. If the card was banned in 1.5, it needed to be restricted in Vintage.
Exactly.
Which eventually led to some incredibly stupid dynamics. For example, regrowth. Colorless in a green sorcery, return a card from your graveyard to your hand, was restricted in Vintage, of course, because there's just like too much broken stuff in Vintage going on. But that meant that regrowth, that a card that even back then was not very good, was banned in 1.5.
Yep.
This is hilarious, dude.
It was so weird.
I don't know if like it makes a lot. It makes sense if you say it like this, but like it's just so. Like, were those formats so linked to each other? Because it almost sounds like it's the same format, except the one has Power 9 and Bazaar and Workshop.
But now here's the question. Now I'm actually going to think back.
Both formats had Workshop,
yeah,
by the way.
I was actually just going to say, because I was like, actually, I do remember 1.5 shop stacks existing, because remember that it wasn't restricted in Vintage. So that means that there were 4 of in in 1.5, right? So it was a crazy format. It was very high power. I remember showing up with like Burn, like 2003.
Of course you did.
That was like the cheapest deck, or just like that was, I would say, my Burn was my first deck. Maybe Green Red Stompy or something like that. But like, Burn, Green Red Stompy before the, when we all have our first deck where it's like the bunch of cool cards. There's no coherence between it. It's just like the deck of cards that you have brought, you've never played before. So obviously just got the stuffing kicked out of me, and then like slowly built up from there. But then kind of as this was going on, as I was getting into this format, I was like, oh my God, it's so expensive, and I have $2 a week allowance. Like, how am I going to buy any cards, right? So then as we get into 2004, that's when the contest comes into play. It's like, okay, the formats are splitting. So I don't know, Julian, do you want to talk about how that all happened on the Wizards website?
So eventually Wizards realized, okay, this doesn't really make a lot of sense. Like, we can't curate both formats at the same time for no apparent reason, really, other than, like, I guess, flavor. So they decided to split them. And that was in, I want to say, August or September 2004. And you know what they did back then? They they did a contest on the Wizards website for the name of the format. So they had like 10, 12 different names that you could vote for. And it was actually kind of binding, almost. They kicked out some of the really stupid names. For example, they kicked out hyper-extended, actually, because they, quote-unquote, said, we want the format to be taken seriously.
Yeah.
So I think the lowest finisher was Mosaic was pretty low. Comprehensive was pretty low on the voting. I think they had Heritage, which was like in the midfield. The second, so Legacy, the format Legacy, is only called that by 2% of the vote. Like really close. They almost named the format Traditional.
Yes.
I mean, I don't hate it, I guess.
I mean, I wouldn't mind that, honestly. But it doesn't fit right now, but like probably back then.
Back then, yeah, very much so. Oh, also Timeless. Timeless was a thing. Something like that.
I mean, we got Timeless now, right? I think there's a format. I think there's a format called Timeless on what's it called, on Magic Arena, I think.
Oh, is that the one where you can play Yawgmoth Bargain?
So I haven't played it myself, but it's a format where you can play Deathfire Charm and Oko and like all these broken spells, but I think Photo Will is banned, I think. So you can't do like the really stupid stuff.
And protected. Okay.
It's kind of like Modern, but you have like Legacy Vintage Power Level Planeswalkers and creatures, I think, to the mix. But I'm probably like more than 50% what I said is probably just wrong. But like it's a pretty messed up format on Magic Arena. That's what I know, and that's what people told me. So yeah.
So yeah, 20 years in the making.
Nice.
Timeless is a thing. So yeah, they decided to split those formats, make an independent Legacy ban list. They nailed it pretty well. I think it's still like pretty close to what we had initially. Like we've seen some unbans over the year, and still to this day, only one card has been unbanned from the OG list, and then later on be banned again, which is Entomb, right? The only card to see that kind of treatment.
Don't even get me started on that ban. Oh my god.
Yeah, that's another different episode.
Yeah, it took a little bit. Yeah.
There was like some other like. I don't want to get too much into the metagame right now. I guess we could make an entire episode about that, because there's just like so many interesting origin stories for Legacy. For example, later, so they created the format in autumn of 2004. Then in March 2004, I think it was Aaron Forsyth released an article, and they said, "Okay, guys, look out." So you probably don't expect this, but half a year from now, we're gonna make all of the Portal 3 Kingdoms, Starter, all those white border cards. We're gonna make those legal half a year from now.
Because
so be prepared.
As people know, those were not legal cards. They were just like, essentially, they were just like gold border cards. It's just like, yep, no, these do not exist. These
basically, like,
yeah,
might as well be unglued cards, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So they were like, actually, you know what? Let's make them legal. And I mean, there were a couple of ones that saw play, like Ravagers of War, Imperial Recruiter. Also, at the time, those were the most expensive Legacy cards ever at 120 euros or something.
Yeah, I remember that.
Strategic Planning was a thing in Vintage also as well. But and that's just like the way Wizards worked back then, and that's the kind of charm to it. In the same article, they said, okay, these sets are going to become legal 6 months from now. And we want you guys to submit a bunch of cards we should probably ban from those sets.
Yeah.
Just like, guys, you do the research for us, okay? You go out there, like, let us know what should we ban.
So obviously, Imperial Seal was one of those.
Imperial
ones
Seal was
like...
banned. Yeah, I don't really remember anything else from that set being banned. But Imperial Seal, still another super incredibly interesting tidbit. Imperial Seal was banned before it became legal. Technically.
Yes.
So in that sense, it's kind of like an emergency ban. But at the same time, it was like an emergency ban 6 months after it becoming legal had been announced. It's just like, it's such a messed up thing. So they announced it, okay, it's going to become legal 6 months from now. And then with a month to go, they were like, oh, by the way, this is going to be banned in Legacy. And then another month later, the whole set became legal. So it was like pre-banned, but still like 6 months in the making. It was just like, it's all kinds of messed up. It's funny to me.
So in this consolidation period, this 2004 to 2006, it kind of like a lot of the decks kind of did turn over from the original 1.5 format. Of course, certain decks didn't cut that. Like Mud was no longer a deck. right? Stacks became a thing, but Mud was no longer a deck. Landstill was kind of a deck, and then losing the mana drains definitely became a much worse deck during this time. So I feel like that 2004 to 2006, again, when I was playing, there was a lot of variability. At that time, that's when I started playing Survival of the Fittest, but I was playing the old Cocoa Pebbles combo, which, again, if you guys don't know what that is the combo survival version with either with some sort of zero casting cost creature, so usually Shield Sphere, Goblin Bombardment, and during Renewal to create an infinite loop of just pinging your
during Renewal? Seriously?
Yep, that was the combo back then.
Isn't it like 16 mana or something?
It's 4 mana, 2 mana, and 0 mana, so yeah, it's pretty big. But you played 4 Academy Rectors, Cabal Therapies. The deck actually did okay because, again, Goblins was actually your biggest aggro deck back then, right? So you're just like, well, if I have enough Wall of Blossoms and what's that wall? Wall of Roots, exactly. I can just gum up the board. I play Plow and Festering Goblin, guys. Festering Goblin, damage on the stack, block. You do stuff you can do fun stuff. This was again an interesting time to be playing Legacy.
I think there was really not a lot of pressure on the format in the sense that there was something that's there's no looming combo deck. There's
no.
You get it, to me from the outside it looks like a playground. You get to go there, you get to play. Whereas in nowadays the playground would be surrounded by sharks and dragons and I don't know monsters and fire breathing airplanes.
I felt the innovation and the pressure wasn't there. So the innovation was there. People were trying stuff and there was there were some combo decks that existed. But again, because of the lack of the prevalence of the internet, I think local metas really mattered a lot more because you knew you were this person's playing. This is the Goblins player. He's going to show up. He's going to be there, right? I need to. So I felt like that, whereas people weren't net decking as much. And I'm not saying it didn't exist, but again, there were a lot fewer resources out there. So people would maybe open up the Scry magazine or Duelist or whatever and be like, oh, look at this piece of technology. I'm going to try that.
That's so sick, dude. So does that mean that if you just made it to, let's say the other side of the country, for example, for a tournament, that you just get paired against, let's say 5-6 opponents and they all have decks that you have never seen before?
Yeah. Or never heard of. And you're
that is so crazy to me because how do you even properly make a sideboard?
You don't.
Okay. You operate on wipes, but also you gotta add sideboarding was not nearly as important as it was as it is today. It was not these days. I feel a lot of matchups in Legacy they are heavily influenced by the sideboard. Sometimes you come to a tournament and you're oh, I fucked up my sideboard. Okay, whatever. But back then, really not as important.
I mean, that kind of incentivizes you to have a very proactive deck at the first place, right? Because how can you how can you build a control deck for a meta game, for a non-existing meta game?
Well, you would be playing general sideboard cards. So just like you said, the control deck versus it was control mid-range aggro or combo, right? So those are your 4 main archetypes. So you're okay, I'm going to put in some engineered plagues because everybody knows that Goblin was good, right? Or it was more general hate. It's this is a good against combo, but you weren't necessarily this is good against this particular deck. So it's very different. You would probably play Tormod's Crypt, but not because you knew that Dredge existed, but because you were oh, there's a survival deck, and there's a this deck, and a that deck. This should be pretty good.
And it might hit, yeah.
Yeah, and also anything that would come at you combo-wise, you would usually see it coming a turn or two ahead and be able to somewhat prepare. It wasn't out of nowhere. I guess you could build something I don't know, Belcher, or the Spanish Inquisition is the classic deck, right? But those decks, they weren't big or popular or a thing that you really care about. And if you did, whatever.
Man, dude, this is so sick. I didn't play competitively back then, but even now, I wish that deck lists weren't published as frequently.
I get the idea,
right? Because it gives you another reason to go to events because that's the place where you get to explore new archetypes or talk about deck strategies or all that kind of stuff. Whereas now, and this is not only for Legacy, but for every format, for Standard and Modern and all these formats, you just show up and you kind of know what's going on, and there's just nothing new you can just see or explore at the event. You just do your thing.
Yeah,
and it's the magic, right, of going to tournaments.
I liken it a little bit because I'm also a car person as well, right? So I liken it to going to a car show where it's just like a general car show. Whoever shows up with whatever they decide to bring. So like going there is kind of like the magic. Whereas if you go to the Porsche Club, it's the same guys bringing the same cars, bringing the same thing. It's like, it's still interesting. It's still fun, but it's like not the same as like the summer show or whatever that everybody brings their random stuff. And you're like, oh my God, I've never seen that before. So it's very cool.
Exactly. Yeah. Like the surprise factor.
So, and I feel like this all really changed when we got to, like Ravnica came into play and obviously brought new cards and Dread, like all these cool things that happened. But I would say Tarmogoyf was, the biggest.
So Tarmogoyf was a big innovation, but also like it hit us with a bit of a delay. So maybe to quickly sum up, like coming out of this, what we like called here Prehistoric Legacy back then, we got all these crazy decks. Also, I want to give shout outs to Fairy Stompy, which is another deck that people couldn't really afford, like Sea Drake, another 100+ hero card in Legacy, so nobody had that. Like, that was a deck, like you would, if you ever saw that deck anywhere, you would remember forever because nobody had a playset of Sea Drake. And
I remember seeing it for the first time and I was like, what in the heck is this?
Yeah, and I was like, you could abuse it, right? Because Sea Drake says it's like a 4/3 blue flyer for 3
2
mana.
2 blue, yeah.
2 and a blue, yeah. But when it comes to play, you have to return 2 target lands you control to your hand. And the thing is, and people figured this out, let's say you cast it using Ancient Tomb and Chrome Mox. Then the ability doesn't even trigger because you have no 2 target lands in play. So you just cast it on the first turn as a 4/3 flyer, and it was completely broken. Like, completely, utterly broken. Then you would put Sword of Fire and Ice on it next turn, just like game over. Yeah. But nobody had that. But you heard about it, like, Fairy Stompy. And I think it was called Fairy Stompy because it also played the, what's the 3 mana, blue chin, whatever. You guys know.
Oh, Serendib.
Serendib by Frit. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah,
anyway,
I remember that.
So coming out of that, very much coming out of that, I want to say it's still somewhat crystallized that Threshold decks were probably the best deck in the format. At least that's what the wisdom at the time was. Because in 2005, we got the first Legacy GPs, one in Lille, and I believe there was also one in Columbus, Ohio or something. But I remember the one in Lille. I didn't go there, but I still remember it. And that kind of almost settled the Threshold debate. Because there was the debate, okay, do you play, like these days when you hear Threshold, you think like Rock Delver, right? Or Canadian Threshold, which is the blue, green, red one. The red was contentious. Like, people sometimes splashed white. White gave you access to Sons of Plowshares, Meddling Mage. Meddling Mage was a big
Mystic
one.
Enforcer sometimes.
Mystic Enforcer. That's the kind of card you think back. You're like, this card used to be a Legacy card? Yeah, very much so. It's like a 3/3 for 4 mana, and if you have Threshold, it turns like into, I want to say, like a 5/6.
6/6, yeah.
But it has Pro Black.
Pro Black, yeah, that's the big thing. So when people played the red version, they would play like Fledgling Dragon for 4 mana, like a 3/3 with like Fire Breathing or something.
That's so cute, yeah.
Yeah. That's their top end. So because Meddling Mage was so good, and Swords of Plowshares, of course, as well, the dominant version was the Banned version, the blue, green, white version. And I want to say like it also did really well at GP. Lil. I believe there was a version that played like 3 copies of Pithing Needle in the main deck, which still like blows my mind these days. But that's the state of the format as Ravnica gets released, but also like right before Ravnica, of course, we got Future Sight, which had Tarmogoyf.
Yeah. I remember the Future Sight pre-release, okay? I remember people opening up Tarmogoyfs and being like, ugh, garbage. And then like, not too long after, people were like, wait a second, this card is actually pretty good. And then it just fully hits. And I remember the first time I played against Rug Delver. Not Delver, but Canadian Threshold.
Yeah, Canadian Threshold. We call it back then. Yeah, it's funny you say like people didn't immediately realize it, but also not too long later. But like back then, not too long later meant still like half a year or something.
Yeah, there was definitely delay even then.
Yeah, people like it was like a trash card because in Standard it wasn't really all that good, and Legacy people were like, I like my Werebears, right? Werebear was the big thing. But
Nimble Mongoose was still used, right? Still good.
Very much so. Yeah, that one like was a thing until like very like 2015, 16, something like that. Probably one of the favorite cards of Kai as well, if I can tell.
Oh yeah, absolutely. More than Tarmogoyf, but yeah.
The nimblest of mongoose. But was it Lamb Fam and somebody else from Canada who then created this version of what we then called Canadian Threshold back then?
That sounds about right.
Yeah, must have been somebody from Canada, right? That's where our innovation is coming from.
I would hope so. That's the only thing we're known for. So yeah, I feel like that's so. In terms of eras, I would say it's like up till Tarmogoyf. Like format starts, everything's kind of still flowy. Kind of the universe has been created, particles are moving around, and then stars start to form, and that's Tarmogoyf.
That's like 2005, 2006, right?
Yeah, I would say that's the next era that I have distinct memory of as well. So
I want to say that's like the first really properly defined era, because the previous one was like an appendix to the 1.5 versus tier 1 type 1 thing.
I could agree with that.
But now, like, the two formats were properly split, even metagame wise. Like, a lot of the old stuff didn't really see play anymore. Like, Time Vault got banned. That guy Ale is still a thing, but not so much. Like, Land's still basically dead. It's just like can't really play the control deck there. Iggy Pop, another thing. There are like a lot of decks that eventually fell by the wayside. Solidarity was still around for a while, but also eventually, like, I guess with the unbanning of Time Spiral, it also meant that wasn't really good anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And now we also get to see somewhat regular legacy GPs. I think there was one in 2007 in GP Flash. Was it Columbus again? Like, do we always have these tournaments in Columbus?
I don't know.
Yeah, it might have been GP Flash. I guess that's an episode for itself again. One of the most broken cards in the history of Legacy. But basically banned right after the GP, and going into the GP, everybody knew it was going to be banned because it was too broken with Protean Hug. But yeah, the return of the GPs, I want to say, in Legacy, that was enough pressure on the format, and also the evolving internet and everything, that, as we talked about, right, all of a sudden, like, information started to disseminate much more easily, flow freely, and decks got a lot more efficient.
Mm-hmm.
Would you say that?
Yeah, I think what ended up happening for me, or at least in my mind, okay, it's like all this is going on. There's more discussion on internet forum boards. Like, this is when the source really becomes, I would say, like an MTG Salvation, and like all these early websites kind of really become the discussion points of like these decks. I think obviously you get Cold Snap, you get Ravnica block, you get all these, as well as the Lorwyn block coming out, and so many things changed. Like, so many efficient cards came out, and I'm just trying to think, like, I'm just looking at my list here, because you just don't even think about it. There's so many cards that we just take for granted. Like, those have always been around, but like
Life from the Loam, Counterbalance, Thoughtseize, as you mentioned,
Ponder, Vendilion Clique, Gaddock Teague, Painter's Servant, Rafika,
the whole Dredge deck.
Yeah, the whole Dredge deck. Like, this is, I would say, this is, like, I agree with you that this is the birth of the format as we know it right now.
Okay, and back then, did you feel like this was a good thing for the format, because like so many changes happened at the same time?
I think this was very interesting because so many archetypes opened up, and a lot of decks were good. Like, obviously there were still the couple of, like, you know, tier 1 decks, but like, we'll call them tier 1.5 or tier 2, whatever, you know, not always, but there were just so many tier 2 decks that could still compete and do well. Like, you could play Agrolome, you could play some sort of countertop, which, you know, you can also say It's the Fear is kind of the, you know, another countertop.
It's the Fear. Can you quickly talk about what's It's the Fear? Because the name is so funny
to
me, and it's such a cool deck.
Okay.
So, please tell me it's mono black.
No. So it's
very far from mono black.
It's like grindy. So I encountered the first time I played against It's the Fear was in Arlington, Washington.
One of the scariest decks to play against.
Yeah, because it played counterbalance top. It played Tarmogoyf, and then it still played like Life from the Loam, Intuition, Academy Ruins, Engineered Explosives combo. So it's just like this really grindy deck that eventually just like it had removal in every. It was 4 colors, right?
Wait, it wasn't it called like Supreme Blue?
No. Supreme Blue is very different. Very different.
Dude,
like, they have like most of almost like all the cards in common. No,
Supreme Blue is very different.
So It's the Fear is basically countertop, 4-color countertop. So there's no red, but you played like a little bit of, you played a little bit of everything, and you just had that grind factor because remember back then, like, it's not like everybody was playing Withered Wretch. Like, you just couldn't block these like Engineered Explosives loops with Academy Ruins because they had Life from the Loam as well to get. So if you wastelanded their Academy Ruins, but then countertop was still really good because there weren't a lot of good cards. Like Corrosing Grip existed, right? But it's basically you needed to have grip to get. You know what I mean? So it's like,
Or you completely lock out your opponent, like all spells and all lands, right?
But exactly. The mana cost was also like reasonably high that you can actually do that.
Yeah.
Oh,
and
that's so disgusting.
And then you
like,
beat them down with like your 4 Tarmogoyfs, right?
I mean, it doesn't really matter what you kill them with. Like, you can also just recur barbarian rings, maybe. I don't know.
You know what the idea behind It's the Fear was? Like a basic idea. There were like many different ideas, but one of the core concepts was that if you run out in end of turn intuition, because one of the biggest cards in the deck was Edged Oracle. You guys remember Edged Oracle?
Yeah.
Like 4 colorless, and it comes into play with sunburst counters for every color you spend. And then you can remove a counter and draw a card. And I think it was like was it XX or 2/2 or 3/3, something like that. Yeah. So the idea was, no matter what you give the opponent for the intuition, you will still end up with Edged Oracle, because you would put Life from the Loam, Academy Ruins, and Edged Oracle.
And you probably had Valorous Stronghold as well, too. I can't remember in that deck. But
maybe. But the idea was like, if they give you the slowest possible way, and they give you Loam, for example, then you play Loam, you get Academy Ruins, you put Edged Oracle on top, and next turn you're going to have Edged Oracle. And from there, you just like bury them in card advantage.
I think most listeners probably don't know what Edged Oracle does, so I'm just gonna read it out for you guys. Like, it's a card, it's an uncommon from Fifth Dawn. I saw this card like back then when I was like 10 years old, but like I never considered this like a format or like a format staple.
Of card in Legacy.
Dude, it's a 4-mana artifact creature which is 0/0. It has Sunburst. And for 1, remove 4 +1/+1 counters from Edged Oracle. Target player draws 3 cards.
Yeah, that was it.
That's insane, bro. And you can recur this with Academy. No, that's
Academy Ruins or Valorous Stronghold or whatever you're using. It was crazy. It was just that. You got to remember, like, a lot of the decks early on weren't playing. Like, you were trying to play an aggro deck, or you're trying to play this, and you're just like, oh my god, there's so much recursion. How do I deal with this?
Yeah.
And you just
also, you could block with this, put damage on the stack, and then draw the extra cards. It was just like it was really hard. Like, if you had a Werebear that was a 4/4, like it's still hard to get past that.
Yeah. You trade and draw 3 cards. That's insane.
One of the ways to beat It's the Fear is just like to try to go under it, which wasn't as easy back then. Mm-hmm. Or I guess you could try to attack the mana base, because this is also where we see Dragon Stompy forming, right? The OG Dragon Stompy with like Rectus Pit Dragon, Arcslogger.
Because Magus of the Moon got printed, right? That was the thing. I think that's what really pushed it over the edge. It's like, because before, just playing 4 Blood Moon was like, okay, that was still good. But it's like you just didn't have enough consistency in dropping that Blood Moon early enough to lock people out. But once you got 8 Blood Moons, oh yeah. And Trinisphere, right? Trinisphere,
yeah.
Right? That was a card. I remember playing Encephalid Breakfast. Test came out. Azu was kind of slowly starting to come out in this timeline as well. Really starting to kind of push the boundaries. Dredge again. I played Dredge still during this time as well. And my favorite deck, Welsh Survival.
Wurscht Survival, that's just like, that's so great. It was named after the German Magic player Michael Wurschti Thiel. And it's basically like a chunk-colored survival deck, which used Recurring Nightmare and Yosai the Morningstar to lock out the opponent. But apart from that, it also used Veteran Explorer, Cable Therapy to ramp into, let's say, Academy Director. Like, it was a really good survival deck that could also operate reasonably well without survival. Mm-hmm. And that was the first time that I played Legacy that I noticed that I was actually not as bad. Like, I spent my first couple of years being really bad in Legacy. But from then on out, that was the first time I was like, ooh, maybe, if I try a little. That's because to me, Wurscht Survival just like is tied to that feeling of, oh, I can actually beat people by being better. Whereas previously I could only beat them by, getting lucky. Or so I thought. Mm-hmm. That's the beauty. Also, like, shoutouts to the very early Agrolome deck. The Agrolome deck, of course, being sometimes like Chunt colored, sometimes
we'll talk about that, don't you worry. That's
Naya colored. It started out like as a deck coming out of Russia, which played something like 4 copies of Card Ape and Devastating Dreams. That's one of the most devastating cards. I was fucking scared of Devastating Dreams. 2 colorless, 2 red, and was it X?
Discard X cards,
so, yeah.
And then destroy every player sacrifices X lands, I believe. It was just like, dude, you played that with like Mox Diamond, Life from the Loam, and everything. It was just like,
good. So we'll talk about that as part of because I played like a very techie Agrolome deck that I should have brought to the GP in 2011, but we'll talk about that after.
Oh yeah, for the next
for the next section. But I feel like this was like, just these cards were coming out and it was exciting, but it didn't feel overpowered. I feel like the only card that was a little bit was when like Progenitus came out. Natural Order obviously became just spiked in price, and then Show and Tell became a deck.
That's basically a Alara block coming up, right?
Yeah.
We're right before that. At
okay,
this
sorry.
moment. Yeah, okay. So you already mentioned like Lauren coming out in 2007, which then increased the power level even more, but I don't want to say the gameplay actually. Like we got Thoughtseize, Noble Hierarch was a big one. Vendilion Click, probably one of the most important additions and the mainstay for Legacy for the next like 8 years or something. Planeswalkers as well, even though they didn't really see play because they were like all like 5 mana, except like Chase Beleren sometimes, but not that much. Garruk, not really.
I mean,
like
Elspeth was kind of like a staple now.
I would say Elspeth was probably the best planeswalker at the time.
Yeah, because Ultimate was also like really good.
Yeah, people were playing that. So White Stacks really became a deck at that time as well. Not a deck, but it was much better, and it's probably the best it ever was because you were just playing moats and humilities, and you were just locking up the board and Armageddoning people, and then you got to play Elspeth, and you actually had a win condition. It was fantastic.
Yeah. Like, because I remember Elspeth from like those Tarmogoyf wars, like when both players have a Tarmogoyf and like you can't really attack into the Tarmogoyf, like the player who later on was Noble Hierarch, I think, but like the player who rips Elspeth could just pump the Tarmogoyf and make him give it flying. And
the thing is, there weren't really competitive decks who played Tarmogoyf and Elspeth. Like you could play it like in, let's say, a Barn Survival where you happen to have Elspeth. I guess that could be a thing.
But they weren't usually together, yeah.
Yeah, they usually play like separate decks.
So I would say, like, yeah, Lorwyn really consolidates, like, this is like 06 to 09 sort of meta, because this was end of high school for me. Like, all these cool cards came out, cool stuff was going on, and then Alara gets printed. Because I remember going to the card shop on the day of, calling them and saying, do you have any show and tells in stock? Okay. And they were like, yes.
Because that wasn't a card, right?
But yep, that wasn't a card. It was $8.
It just was like completely Timmy card.
It was $8. Now, I had played against it previously. Back in like 2004, people were playing Sneak Attack show and tell and using like Darksteel Colossus or Sarah Avatar. Very slow. Terrible. Terrible cards. But again, still playable. I remember calling the card shop and saying, hey, do you have these? They were $8 and I was in university. And I remember going down there and they're like, oh, they've just jumped to $20. And I'm like, well, I called you 30 minutes ago and they were $8. So he honored it, luckily. And that's how I got my first set of show and tells. But like, that was the kind of the crazy, weird time. So I would say that's another era. So I would say the end of the era comes to a close with Shards of Alara really mixing it up.
Yeah. Shards of Alara, probably one of the most high impact sets that we've ever seen in Legacy. Changed the format, I want to say, for the better by a massive amount. Like, it's not like the previous format was bad, but Shards of Alara introduced a lot of cards that are still beloved to this day, very much so. Like, for example, I picked out a couple of examples here, especially for green decks. I guess that explains why Matt and I like the set so much.
I think so.
Yeah, overall, we got Noble Hierarch, Knight of the Reliquary, Korsali Pride Mage, Rock Monk, Frozen Grip. That's just really speaking for the green decks, right? All of a sudden, overnight, almost green mid-range became a tier 1 deck, kind of like you played like all these barn version or green-white versions.
Mid-range opened up. All these cards, coupled with, say, Thoughtseize and stuff that was printed before, now the mid-range really, like before you had aggro, combo, control. But now I feel like Shards of Alara really opened up mid-range. Really,
yeah, very much so. Like we had decks that called themselves mid-range, but they really were like aggro decks that kind of fizzled out and then had some mid-game. But these decks actively targeted the mid-game, right? They were not looking to kill you by turn 3 or 4 with their creatures. They were actively like looking to dominate board positions and also have like good gameplay against basically anything, the way you play mid-range.
Mm-hmm. And this is kind of where we start to see like the survival decks real again, because the green was getting good. Survival really pushed. Agrolome got better. Merfolk became a massive deck. Zoo became a deck. Countertop was kind of on the downswing with this because Cross and Grip really put a lot of pressure on those like It's the Fear kind of style decks because now there was an out, right? Fire
as well as Korsali Pride Mage, right?
That's exactly. And like Fire Spout really pushed, like I was playing Bug Landstill with splashing red for Fire Spout because it allowed you to survive to kind of, you would blow out goblins or kind of your Merfolk opponent until you could get to the mid-range where you're landing, say, your Pernicious Deed or your Jace the Mind Sculptor or something like that. And it was just like, I really liked playing in this time. Like this was a very interesting time.
Yeah, to me, that was also the time where I finally started hitting tournaments regularly and even like playing internationally for the first time at GP Madrid 2010.
Nice.
And yeah, now this this is the era where 4-color Supreme Blue becomes a deck. And that was a 4-color deck that wasn't playing black. instead it played like it had the built-in synergy of playing Fire Spout and Rock Swarmonk, because
so
Rock
good.
Swarmonk survives Fire Spout.
It was so good. And just like, everything felt so, not fair. I don't want to say it felt fair, but it just felt like right. It was just like, and this was when I would say, like, this is when I started going to play at the Star City Games tournaments in the States. So this was like a big deal. This was my, like, I would say this was my really like coming together of, I was never really that good. Let's be honest. Like, obviously Julian and Kai, you guys are much better than I am. But like, I would say when I was on my way to becoming better,
there was a time where you were the best of us.
There was a time, not for long, just for a moment.
That might have actually been right around that time.
It might have been. I think my peak was like early Deathrite Shaman. But anyway, that's fine. Like this format was fantastic, and I feel like people were excited as well. I didn't feel like obviously, Blue Black Reanimator was amazing. Mystical Tutor was like, oh my god, this card is so good. And I remember being at the Star City Games where they were like, no, Mystical Tutor needs to go. Like I remember this very well. I remember having pho, like the Vietnamese soup, for the first time, like going out and like hanging out with the guys and just meeting all these people and, you know, being an adult kind of for the first time, right? Where you're not at home anymore and you're kind of out with your friends. And it's like, for me, this is a very nostalgic period just because this was like my growing up. As well as
it's kind of funny, like you talk about that era and Mystical Tutor getting banned the way other guys talk about touching like a boob for the first time or something.
That's funny.
It just feels like that, but yeah.
I mean, it just I don't know. It's just like I have so much nostalgia for this format, and yes, there were things that were obviously broken, and I feel like the specter of this, the kind of the dark shadow that looms over this, is the Survival Vengevine period that, and I remember that period differently. I want to see how you guys remember Survival Vengevine, because for me at that time, I had shifted decks to playing Bug Landstill Splash Red, and I was playing 4 Extirpates in the sideboard, and like so it's just like you played Counter Magic. I was playing Spell Snare as well. So you're just like hold up mana.
Spell Snare was one of the most important spells in the entire format.
Yeah. And so I didn't. And so for me, I didn't understand why people, because once Survival got removed or Vengevine got removed, that deck was basically just fell apart. So like for me, it played a mid range deck, but again against the Bug Landstill deck, right? Against the I'm playing 4 Fire Spouts and 4 Pernicious Deeds. It's like, well, good luck, have fun, you know. Here we are, we're playing the game that I want to play now. So I felt like, yes, don't get me wrong, the deck was very, very good, but I remember it as a period of like, why did you take away Survival? I loved playing it for playing Cocoa Pebbles. You could have just been Vengevine. Anyway, that's how I remember it, but I'll let you guys chime in.
So the way... Oh, Kai, you want to go first? I think you played back then as well.
Because I mean, this was like my like this was basically the era when I got to, you know, start out the format. It was specifically the GP Columbus 2010, where like the GP where Tom Martell played Supreme Blue. I think it was Supreme. It was definitely a Fire Spout Tarmogoyf counter top deck.
Okay.
So and I think it was him against Tomoharu Saito on a blue black Merfolk deck, which was really exciting.
I remember that. The one was where Caleb Durward and Brian Cook were in the top 8 as well.
Exactly. And Caleb Durward, this man actually made me start Legacy because of his blue-green survival deck. It was like this 5-minute terrible like quality YouTube video, which you can probably still find on the internet somewhere, where like someone took his like potato microphone and camera and they did like this 5-minute deck tech where Caleb laid out his entire deck, and it was like this I don't know, just like bunch of very bad creatures like White Mongrel and like Basking Rootwall and Aquamoeba and Wanda and all these things, but the core engine was Vengevine and Survival of the Fittest, and there were also a couple of GTs in the deck. I think like
I got the deck list in front of me right now.
2 or 3 or so.
You mean Caleb's deck list? So Caleb actually had, it's loading up right now. By the way, you were right. Tom lost the finals to Saito, and he actually did play 4-color counterbalance, they say.
Exactly.
Though
He
looks like
he even played
three-color.
Lavan in the sideboard.
Yeah,
played one of
Lawan was a
Lawan.
good card though.
Yeah,
like that
that's
was
so
an amazing card at the time. I remember, because my brother had built a Cephalid deck and was using Lawan, and I was like, these are now expensive. I need to borrow these. Never gave them back, but that's okay.
They basically bounce all blue creatures, right? And the opponent cannot play blue creatures anymore.
That's insane. Like it's
Yeah,
Norfolk.
just
Yeah.
And then you could play with
They
Painter's
could also
Servant.
do it in Painter.
Oh shit, nice, yeah. But I mean, he lost to Tomoharu Saito regardless, but
Yeah, but that was the big innovation, right? Because Tomoharu, like Saito, he played Murfolk, which used to be a traditional like mono blue deck. Like sometimes it's splash green for Tarmogoyf, like earlier, but like it was a mono blue deck. And he all of a sudden played black. And I think leading up to a tournament, there were a couple of like tournament results where people splashed black in the sideboard of Murfolk, because Murfolk did struggle against the rise of the blue decks, of the green decks, like for example. Rox Warmog,
right?
for example, right? Yeah, Sue as well. Yeah, Sue was like pretty good against them. But Rox Warmog and like Knight of Reliquary, those like mid-range decks, they were like decent against them, especially if they could avoid the Island Walk. But now all of a sudden, Murfolk splashes black. You guys remember which cards they splashed for?
Dude, it was Perish, no?
Fairy Macabre as well.
Yeah,
I think it was Perish and
I think it was Perish though, yeah.
And the white Perish, like which blows up all.
Oh,
Nature's Ruin. Yeah,
Nature's Ruin.
Nature's Ruin, the one from Portal, destroy all green creatures, and Perish the same, of course, from Tempest, I want to say.
Yeah.
Tempest.
Wasn't there like even like an Engineered Plague in the sideboard?
4 copies
goblins?
of Engineered Plague for the mirror, because Murfolk was one of the most dominant decks in the format at that time. Like very much so. And that was like another leg up on the mirror, of course. I played Murfolk back then, was like a really good deck. Like
I remember
really,
that.
really
Because you were just playing a blue deck and you're just like, oh my god, Island Walk, I just can't beat this. But I think people forget like how good Rox Warmunk was. That was one of my favorite cards at that time. Oh, just like it was just so simple. 3/4, 3 mana, it has lifelink, then all of a sudden you've got like a Noble Hierarch and a Kasali Pride Mage into Rox Warmunk, and then you're just like, oh, I'm swinging for 5, and it was just, these were the
was
good times.
really good, and I also really liked the card. But looking back, I feel like it was still somewhat less efficient than stuff like Knight of Reliquary and everything, but like its presence itself, right, was good enough to sometimes like shift meta games. But yeah, so what people sometimes they tried like Mind Harness, right? One blue enchantment aura, you control enchanted green or red creature, and has cumulative upkeep 1, which like if only for 1 or 2 turns it was good enough to get past the Rox Warmog. But yeah, that's GP, one of the most legendary GPs in history, of course, won by Tomoharu Saito against Tom Martell in the finals. Caleb Dover playing Blue-Green Madness. We got Brad Nelson there in the top 8 as well. Brian Cook playing the Epic Storm, and of course, Ugly Duckling. You guys remember Ugly Duckling? I don't know how to call it. It's basically like a one-off. Christopher Gosselin or something. Played Farm of the Dragon. What else is there?
Yes.
Oh, it's Doomsday.
Doomsday,
no?
yeah, Doomsday.
It was Doomsday /
Fate
Show and
Doomsday.
Tell.
Yeah. So then like I would say the Shards of Alara was like its own time. Like that 2009 to 2011, that's a big shakeup. Because when did Zendikar come out? Because that was the next big thing too.
That's still the same period. Like Zendikar is still part of that block that we're talking about. Also, like something else that like Zendikar is a big thing, because that Zendikar block, especially Worldwide, right? They brought Chase.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, they brought Chase, and they brought like a lot. That block also brought a lot of reanimator creatures.
Oh, and
because
Stoneforge Mystic too, yeah.
Yeah, up until now, you might have been wondering, like, I guess show and tell is a thing now, because we touched on it, right? All of a sudden, like, we put in Progenitors, which is so much better than what people did before. Like, people put in Woodfall Primus for, like, show and tell. Okay, we're a little bit all over the place. Let me sort that. Or I guess I am. Touching on show and tell again. Like, the first way that people played show and tell was actually when Dream Halls was unbanned in 2009. So it was like a strict combo deck. But like you put in Dream Halls, or you sometimes hardcast Dream Halls, and then you had like these weird things where you cast like Conflux, which draws you more cards, cast another Conflux, and it was really clunky, but it kind of was a thing when like Dream Halls was unbanned. And that was when people first like started playing show and tell, as Matt mentioned. And then we got Conflux, I guess the set Conflux bringing us Progenitors, which allowed like Sneak and Show to become a thing with all of these cards. But these creatures didn't really work with Reanimator. But now we got Alara block, another big thing Alara block did. It brought us Reanimator. It brought us Imperial, Archangel, Inkwell Leviathan, Iona, Shield of Emeria, probably the most important one from back then.
And then Caracas skyrockets in price.
Yeah, 2010, right? I remember that as well. Caracas, like this obscure card from Legends, bounces a legend. Like, who would ever use that? It was, for many decks, it was the only out they had to Iona, because Iona would shut down white, which for a lot of like these green decks was the only way of removal. Yeah. So you had Knight of Reliquary, of course, which allowed you to get. There was just like strategy-wise, tactical-wise, it was just like it worked, right? All of that.
I 100% agree.
It was so coherent, unintentionally.
It was so good. And then was Scoos printed yet? I can't remember. Scavenging Ooze?
Scoos, wasn't it like a special printing in the M10? I think it was also. I think it came back on.
And then that came out, and I mean, we'll talk about again Zendikar block in a second, but like, because that was Greens and Zenith with Scars, but still playing like, again, you could still play Survival at this time, and then you'd go get Scavenging Ooze. Like, again, I felt like, like you said, the technology and the gameplay and the depths that people were going was just so good. It was just like problem solving after problem solving after problem solving.
Yeah, and also we didn't really have a lot of these decks that like ended the game on the spot. Touching back on Reanimator, a friend of mine had this theory that if, for example, these mid-range or Maverick decks, they're untapped with Knight of Reliquary, then Reanimator couldn't win anymore, no matter what they threw at you. Almost like they could have like, I don't know, combinations of like a couple of submerges and stuff. But yeah, it was really cool because you could just like answer so many of the things. There was no reanimation one and done thing, but it was very common that they would get, what's the one that you can't be attacked? Blazing Archon, like sometimes that to stabilize, then another creature, then a third creature, and then you could win the game. That's how Reanimator worked. Like often 2 creatures were enough. A single creature was basically never enough.
I agree with
except for like corner case scenarios. And that was the beauty of it. It was like you could play it, and there was a time, like for example, GP. I guess we get into that later on. But what I want to touch on is the only thing that was really dominant, and I guess there are 2 things that were really dominant. We already touched on survival, and I guess I should finish that thought. Like Matt, you mentioned there were a lot of ways to stop it. But the best survival deck I remember from back then is the green-white one. The green-white one that played a heavy mid-range game with like Mother of Runes and Knight of Reliquary, and it just happened to have that explosiveness of being able to Vengevine the opponent out. As opposed to like there were decks that played like Lion's Eye Diamond, right? So you could like play sometimes even like turn 1 survival, and then on the second turn, like you crack your LED and you have your Basking Root Rollers, and it's just like you try to win the game on the second turn, and that's
like a turbo survival.
Yeah, that was like a main reason why people hated it. But the best one was actually the one that could operate reasonably well without survival and occasionally have the nut draw, which as a concept is something that became basically the defining characteristic of Legacy, I almost want to say. Like you have like these mid-range combo decks that can also like kill you on the second turn. And we didn't really have that before, except for like really inconsistent decks. And the big decision, right, was do we ban survival or do we ban Vengevine?
And a lot of people at the time were like, okay, if you give us back survival, like if we get to have survival, we've had survival for so long, and it was never a dominant archetype. But then now Vengevine has kind of pushed it over the edge. So a lot of people were saying, well, just ban the creature and we'll be fine. But at the time, it seemed like policy was, no, we're going to take the archetype out. Nowadays, we've obviously seen that they have nixed creatures specifically that have been too powerful, right? We have seen this in, say, the last 5 or 6 years. But at the time, I think they weren't willing to say that a new product that they just printed was overpowered. So
it was the whole discussion was like ban the enabler versus ban the payoff. And Wizards erred on the side of like banning the enabler.
Also, I feel like, I mean, the word power creep didn't exist back then, right? So, like, I get why they made that decision back then. Just because probably they just were maybe a little concerned about future like busted creature paint and printing. So that was
the whole reasoning.
Yeah, but like these days, like if you compare it to like Legacy right now, it's almost it's kind of equivalent to like, okay, should we ban Daze or should we ban that Rag event, for example, what happened like a few years ago, or like any of the busted new creatures, right? That cost like 1 or 2 mana.
Yeah, I want to say like if we banned like something like Daze today, that would be akin to like us banning survival back then because it was such a core card of the format and wasn't really broken in itself.
Absolutely. I wish like that, like they banned Vengevine and not Survival, and like Survival would be totally fine these days. I think
you just explained the entire mental state of being that Matt and I have been in ever since for the last 16 years.
Yeah, 100%. Because I'll be 100%. I talked to a lot of people. A lot of people liked Survival, played Survival. Vengevine ruined it. But I think this is like the nucleation point for the thought process of pre-modern, or middle school, or classic legacy, or any of these other formats where it's like, fuck, I really want to play with this card. This card is fun. It was legal for so long, and then they banned it in this format. And I think this will lead to, again, more discussions later about, like, you know, for all these alternative legacy formats, we'll call them pre-modern, middle school, classic legacy, etc. I think this is that point in time where we look back and say, okay, here's what happened. And I think that was a big mistake, because
it basically we also left a scar that never really closed.
And we know that with Scars of Mirrodin, again, this will be later on, Scars of Mirrodin also printed Surgical Extraction, right? So it's like the Phyrexian mana extirpate, basically. So it's like that was a great answer to Vengevine, just unfortunately printed, 6 months too late. Could they have just said, oh, and put this in an earlier set? I'm sure they could have. They just chose not to. So very interesting. But I feel like this is the end of that era where the Zendikar block breaks Survival.
You're actually right. I totally forgot that.
Yeah.
For Surgical Extraction was printed literally 6 months after Survival was banned.
Yep.
Ooh.
So
yeah.
They could have had the perfect answer, yeah.
Yeah. It's like, well, wait 6 more months. Yeah, the format might be broken. More to follow, right? You could still play Leeline. You could still play Planar Void. You could still play.
Isn't this wild though? Because like Wizards probably knew like what's gonna be printed in 6 months, right? Like,
they knew. They knew.
But I think that was like, you're asking too much of them, and I gotta defend them in that regard. Like, there's a card coming out 6 months from now that like solves an issue right now. That's just like so hard for them to communicate on. I think it was fine that they did something. I just wish they did something else.
Yeah, I agree. But I feel like, again, I feel like this is the next era, right? It's like Zendikar comes out. I remember the Hidden Treasures in the pre-release. People were just like going wild. It was crazy that people were opening them. I don't know if you guys remember, but that was.
Yeah. Oh, dude, actually, we got to talk about that. Like you mentioned it as a new era. To me, it's like. It's like the end of that era, but I guess that's just like splitting hairs. But when Zendikar came out, Kai, you remember what they did with the booster packs back then?
Oh shit, no, dude.
They put like Black Lotus, Moxen, like what have you.
Original printing.
They put those into original printings, like not reprints. They had us like a stash of these high-end amazing cards, and they randomly put them in Zendikar booster packs.
Yeah, first print booster packs.
Wait, what?
You could open Black Lotus from a Zendikar booster pack.
Yep.
Like OG Zendikar?
Yes.
So the first printing, not the subsequent print runs, but the first one. So from what I heard, some people say these cards were just sitting in a vault. Some people say they had slowly been buying them and adding to the vault. But again, the whole point was like the Hidden Treasures thing, and you could open up a pack, and people opened up, I think there was a Tabernacle opened and a Savannah opened at the pre-release that I was at. And people were just like, what is happening? Like, can I play with these? What's going on? And so it was just like this huge surprise, because then people were like, oh, wait, are these in these packs? And then people were just like, I gotta buy Zendikar packs. So the marketing, amazing.
Dude, imagine you're at the pre-release and you have like this limited tech, and you have like a random Tabernacle in your limited tech.
It's actually so bad.
But there was a guy.
Black Lotus.
There was a guy who opened a Black Lotus not in our store or area, but I think he had bought a box of Zendikar, and he opened up a Black Lotus. Like,
that's insane.
Like amazing. And he wasn't even like, an old, it was just like some random, 30 something, just like so cool, right?
The other thing that was really cool. The other thing that I still want to touch on about that era, because I said there were two broken things happening there, right? The first one was the abuse of Vengevine. The other one, and I want to say that was the first time that there was like this big story in the format that everybody needed to have an opinion on, whereas previously we talked about, right, how there's like all these still kind of independent meta games, like people played good decks, but all of a sudden, after GP Madrid 2010, back then the biggest Magic GP of all time, 2,228 players, I was there, loved it. Also did it horrible. So Mystical Tutor became the talk. Like everybody had to have an opinion on Mystical Tutor because, of course, Andreas Müller actually won playing Reanimator, Blue-Black Reanimator. But I want to say the biggest story of that top 8 was actually Ant, like Ad Nauseam Storm. I think Saito wasn't there. And there was this guy from the Czech Republic as well. Actually, he's a friend of Tomáš Vlaček, whom actually you guys might know. You do know, of course.
Of course.
I was there filming like a lot of Swiss matches and put them on my YouTube. I filmed the top 8 and everything. Like looking back, it's just like so great to have these artifacts of the time back then. And I remember that Storm guy, his name escapes me right now. I think he had like a more Vietnamese name, if I remember correctly. And he was about to win, but then he died to his own ad nauseum. And then Andreas Müller just like fell back in his chair and was just like, oh my God, I actually won the GP. To me, it was one of the most exciting moments of my life. It was my first GP. I was watching the finals and just like, wow, these guys are doing it.
Live and die by the sword, right?
You very much do. But yeah, Mystical Tutor was the big thing because, of course, Mystical Tutor in instant allows you to put another instant or sorcery on top of your library for just a single blue. It allowed you to basically play these reanimated decks. You could find your Entomb, you could find your reanimation spell, or if you really had to, you could also find your Dark Ritual if you wanted to do it on the second turn if you already had it. Technically also your sideboard cards later on. It did it all. And of course, Ad Nauseam Tendrils would do the same. Ad Nauseam Tendrils, another deck, which of course is known to try to find the tutors, or sometimes even like Cable Rituals, what have you. Or even the Ad Nauseam if you could. And there was a short time where you could even float, like the rules worked that you could float mana from
through
your
phases,
upkeep.
Right?
Yeah, like the mana would end at the end of the beginning, or what's it called, beginning step something, but you could float it through phases, like throughout the entire combat step, or like, for example, you would play Mystical Tutor on your upkeep, put Ad Nauseam on top, then you cracked LED, then you went to your draw step, you still had the mana, and you could cast LED. That's not
so
why Mystical Tutor was banned. Like, it's not like that interaction was crazy. They patched that out. But overall, the Wizards decided, okay, this card, for what it does, especially at instant speed, is too good.
I remember this because I remember them saying the term gentleman's agreement.
One of the most contentious terms in the history of the format, right?
I was like, because I didn't feel like, it's not like play groups were like, oh, we're not going to play Mystical Tutor, guys. We're not doing this. Like, because I don't feel like that was the case, at least not in our groups.
Yeah, so the gentleman agreement back then was, and it was actually really interesting because Wizards took a lot of time to apparently research this and also like write about it. They said they believe Mystical Tutor and the decks are created are too good for Legacy, but when they went out into the wild and they looked into LGSs, what they saw was almost nobody playing it. So they figured, like, inductive thinking, I guess, was, okay, apparently these communities, these different communities all across the world, they have an unspoken, or sometimes even spoken, but I think the vibe was unspoken agreement that we will not play these broken cards in order, and they phrased it like to maintain this beautiful utopia and to not defile it with these decks. So they said the Legacy community had already banned the card in anything but Word, right? So it was banned, but it wasn't really. And they want to maintain and spread that utopia to the whole format and like put it in stone by banning Mystical Tutor. Like it was really like almost like metaphysical. Like there was something romantic about it in a way. They wanted to create this perfect world and maintain it, so they banned it. And a lot of people had a lot of issues with that. I gotta say, I did not. I don't really care about the gentleman's agreement. It was more like a meme to me, like, because like playing back then, we didn't really have that. It's just like the stakes were not high enough that I would actually push myself to play the best possible deck because I just wanted to play a different deck. That was it. It wasn't. Yeah, I guess in that way, we were just like not competitive enough.
I agree. I don't think, like, we had some people playing it, but I feel like, again, because of that local, it was still kind of the local meta situation, I feel like. I feel like people would sideboard against it. People were playing Chalice of the Void. People were, like, these kind of, I don't know. I just feel like people really hated on those players, or there was enough sideboard technology that, like, it didn't feel like it was like, oh, I'm showing up to my local and there's the mystical tutor guy back again with his ant deck. Like, ugh. Like that I felt like that never happened to us. But again, who knows? Maybe it was we were all just having fun. We were all just kids. We were just playing Legacy, having a good time. So, I don't know. I remember it getting banned and then Survival kind of fading off into the sunset. And then, in December 2010, basically said for 2011, this card will not be. And that was, I think, the moment that I was like, I was just very upset.
Yeah,
and then,
I can get that.
And then, after that happened, we all got more upset because Phyrexian Mana was printed.
Phyrexian Mana was something else when you first got it, right? Of course, the most important card back then that basically, I didn't want to really make it an era. This is like basically the next era. So the Shards of Alara Shakeup, as we called it, was 2009 until 2011. Then from May until September 2011, like 5 months. That's not really a whole era to me. If you want to classify it as one, that's fine. To me, it's more like an interlude. We got the mental misstep era, and to me,
the fever dream, Julian.
Yeah, it was this weird fever dream. It was just like everything changed. Like heavily gameplay styles were altered. It wasn't bad. And also, like, I see the issues with it, and in the end, I agreed with the ban. And I'm not here to defend mental misstep. Actually, I am far from that. I'm happy it's banned. But those moments, right? It's a kind of meta game that you would probably eventually grow tired of. But those 5 months. And maybe it's just like for me, because that was the time where I really came of age as a Legacy player. That was the time where I went to a tournament expecting to, like, maybe not win it, but top 8. Because I felt like Ruck Order, that was one of the biggest decks that taught me so much. Yeah. It was so good, right?
Yeah. So you may remember the term misstepping your misstep, and then continuing to play, and then dazing their misstep. It was Stack Wars to high heaven. I'll let you guys talk a little bit because I have a little bit of a longer story, so I'll let you guys kind of shake this out a bit first, and then.
I mean, this was basically like everyone had to play mental misstep, right? Is what I was told. I was way too bad at Legacy back then to fully understand why this card was so problematic. I just kind of enjoyed having more free spells in my like Force of Will Day stack. But like I saw how like goblins, for example, they picked up 4 missteps just because they wanted to protect their goblin lackey. And I saw like a bunch of non-blue decks just playing this card as a 4-off, and people told me that like deck construction was basically you have to start with missteps and then you have to build your deck additionally, like the other 56 cards. And,
yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, and like a little bit of a story, like when I in August, September 2011, I finished high school and I moved to Japan for a year. Didn't play Legacy for like a month or so because I didn't know anyone in Japan who played Legacy. I also didn't go to any shops, and I just did like non-Magic stuff, right? But then like I happened to walk into this one Magic store kind of by accident, and they told me, hey, this Saturday is like a Legacy event, you like you want to come over, right? And I picked up my deck from like a month or two ago, played the first round. My opponent, in the first 2 games, nothing happened. In the third game, my opponent played a Swords of Plowshares on my Basking Rootwaller, and I misstepped it because I still had it in my main deck, and we had like the longest judge call because I didn't know what was going on. Like, because it was like it was like banned for like a week or 2.
Oh, you said. Oh, okay. Now I get it.
Yeah. I didn't know because I was so disconnected from like the meta game or in the format, and
that's beautiful though.
Yeah.
I like.
But that. Like I was so like, dude, I was so confident on that misstep on the Swords of Plowshares, right? Like I was kind of waiting for the Swords of Plowshares to happen, and as soon as Swords of Plowshares hit the table today, I had the misstep. My opponent's like, what?
Yeah. So before we get into Matt's story, like a very quick outline of what the metagame looked like, and of course the intention why it was printed. Wizard said when they banned it wasn't like an experiment. They wanted to give non-blue decks a way to interact with like combo decks so they could defend themselves. Didn't really work that well. Like basically heavily shaped the entire metagame. Combo decks could even play their own missteps, but a lot of times actually combo decks switched to being a little bit more top heavy, like show and tell combo decks, Hive Mind. That's, I want to say, the Hive Mind combo deck with all those pacts, and that was like secretly one of the better decks that only really started showing up towards the end of that era. Or, well, now I call it an era. Okay. But the big decks back then were Ruck Order, Bug, Landstill, and Esper Stoneblade. Ruck Order, basically, You got 4 natural orders, you got 4 Rendilian Click, you got 3 copies of Sylvan Library often, 4 copies of Noble Hierarch, Green Sun Senate to give you more green creatures, and also like some silver bullets like Scavenging Ooze, which had been printed at that time. It was a very toolboxy deck, and you were able to get into the mid game, and that's the theme for the entire format. Because Mental Misstep not only answers the opponent's turn 1 play, it answers the opponent's turn 1 play in a tempo positive way, right? So you accelerate on the first turn, you counter their first turn play, and then you untap and you have 3 mana. It's you think it's a small thing, but actually it led to the creation of these much more mid-range combo almost decks for example, Rock Order, which allowed you to get either Imperial Archangel or Protonitus, but also Bug Lancel. I think Bug Lancel benefited from the existence of that card even more. What that deck was allowed to play is, it played 4 copies of Chase the Mind Sculptor, it played 4 copies of Liliana of the Veil after it came out on Innistrad, it played 4 copies of Standstill, and it played 4 copies of Pernicious Deed. So when you look at this, it's just like super endgame loaded deck, right? It had some removal. Channel Fireball famously played it at a GP, playing 4 different removal spells. I think they played Smother, Innocent Blood, Ghastly Demise, and a 4th one that I don't remember right now. And Dismember, I believe, actually. And that was the removal spell they had, point removal, and then, of course, 4 Pernicious Deed. And it was just like this really end of mid-game, end-game focus deck, and it was just kind of cool. Played 4 copies of Mishra's Factory, of course, to get under the Standstill. It was just a really cool deck. And later on, it also would play like 4 copies of Ancestor Visions over Sense. It's just like so many small, cool things. And that was Bug Lancel. That's the other deck that heavily benefited from the format being slowed down, so you could play a Behemoth like that. The third one is Esper Stoneblade. Of course, you already mentioned that Stormforge Mystic got printed, Batterskull, you also got Lingering Souls, all that kind of stuff. Batterskull coming off the Stoneforge. Those were the big things that were happening in the metagame. And even I can't really say Hivemind because it took a little bit longer to catch on, but those were the big 3. And even though the metagame was, in our show notes, I called it probably the most defined metagame in the history of Legacy, and I think that's true, because it was actually very narrow. It almost felt like playing Standard, I want to say. Like, when you play Standard and there's like 3, 4, maybe a 5th deck that nobody plays, and that's it. And those are the top decks. I mean, people played other decks, and I don't want to say those other decks were bad, but the metagame heavily revolved around these 3, sometimes 4 decks. And that was kind of cool, I want to say. What did you play back then?
I mean, I mean, like it's like it's either that or you have like the super widespread, like you can kind of play whatever you want formats. I'm typically like one of those guys like who like metagames where you can totally expect what to get paired against, because that makes like building sideboards like more interesting, or like you can go really specific on like strategy and stuff and go like, okay, so against, I don't know, these 5 decks, like I'm gonna swap exactly these 3 cards, these 4 cards, and these 5 cards in these matchups, and you can kind of map everything out. Whereas like in the Wild West, like you're kind of lost and you have to kind of go with the gut feeling, which I don't like as much maybe. I personally played like a very weak post survival like Vengevine deck, but with intuitions instead of Survival of the Fittest. It was pretty bad. Like basically I went like Noble Hierarch turn 1, turn 2 pass, on your end step cast Intuition for 3 Vengevines. On my turn 3 I cast like Aquamoeba plus, and I don't know, discard like a Root Follow, whatever, trigger all the Vengevines, and then attack for, I don't know, 10 plus damage or whatever.
There was a deck that was called Blue-Green Cloud something. I don't remember the whole name, but that it did exactly that, like Intuition for It wasn't bad until we got Scavenging Ooze. Scavenging Ooze was a problem. Also, Knight of Reliquary for Bojuka Bog was a problem. And Jotungrunt. I don't know how to pronounce this dude. Yeah, Jotungrunt.
Jotungrunt. The 2 mana
also, by the way, another very controversial card in history of Legacy. That's going too deep into the stories, I guess. Okay. There was a deck called Blue-White Tempo, and that was like P4 meter for the win and somebody else on the source, and they were like making the case for that deck for such a long time, and it was one of the most heated threads.
Oh yeah.
And the deck list became weirder and weirder. At some point, they played 2 copies of Etherwile because it's bad to draw in multiples, and it also had like Jotun Grunt and Vexing Sphinx and Phantom Seers.
What did you guys play during the Mental Misstep era? Because it was only 5 months.
I played Rock Order, but also Buglancer. I had both decks. I played both decks. I loved Rock Order the most, but I thought that Buglancer was maybe better, to be honest.
You were such a spike.
I've been probably one of the biggest legacy spikes. Okay, that's talking too much. But there was a time where I was like insanely spiky. But actually, that came much later.
So this is a little longer for me, but I mean, again, at the end of that era, we knew. So James Onions, James Sue, myself, and a couple other people were going to GP Providence in May 2011. So leading
that's
up,
when James almost killed you, right?
Yes, exactly.
Okay, you got to preload the payoff.
Yeah, so we were training for this for like, I would say since January. So it's like as soon as Survival got banned, we were like, okay, so what are we playing at the GP? We were trying out different decks. I was playing Black-White for a long time because it was really good against the Fatties decks. So you play like Tariff and you play Vampire Nighthawk, and like it was kind of a little bit of technology there, but it was actually pretty good. But we, in a qualifier, I played against James Sue, because back then, again, I don't know how it works now, but like you could win a local tournament and get buys for the GP, like 3-round buys or however. Yeah,
kind of crazy when you think back.
I know, crazy. So I was playing against James Sue and he was playing Zoo, so Naya Zoo, and unfortunately lost to him in the finals, which sucked because of course we're all going together on the trip. So I was like, okay, I'm not going to play this deck anymore. What are we playing? So at that time, I still had Junk kind of, always built, and I had been playing it kind of continuously for quite some time. But then I was like, I want to try something different because the selective pressure of the Mental Misstep was so strong. Like you saw the results of like these Esper Stoneblade decks, and just like everybody was just saying these decks are unbeatable. So I was like, no. We're going to skip the 1-drop slot entirely. Like there are no 1-drops in the deck. How do we play this deck? And the answer was Aggro Loam with Chalice of the Void main deck. So back then, Chalice of the Void in the main deck was not always a choice. Sometimes people were playing the sideboard, sometimes the main, whatever. But I was playing Countryside Crusher, Tarmogoyf, Dark Confidant, and I was playing Chalice of the Void. I was also playing, because again, I guess it was extended at that time, people were playing the Punishing Fires combo that had just come out in Zendikar, but nobody was playing it in Legacy. So I was playing Grove of the Burn Willows with Punishing Fires. And I was like, okay, well, this deck seems very fucking good against Esper Stoneblade, because they basically, you're just like, you blank all their removal, because they have so many 1-drops in the deck, plus the Mental Missteps. You just play Countryside Crusher, Terravore, like all the normal cards, and then you just blow them out with like removal spells, recursion, you just grind them into the dirt. But the Batterskull was always the problem, right? It's like, if they could connect with the Batterskull and the Batterskull stayed on board, that became just a really big grind, unless you then hit your Seismic Assault and they didn't have the counterspell, etc., etc. So
Seismic Assault, that was another great card back
then. So like again,
that
deck was superb technology. And so we actually were like, we were hunting for a removal spell, and I played Eternal Witness as well, of course. So it's like, what removal spell? Like, are we going to play Ancient Grudge in the main so that you could like flash it back and like hit the Batterskull or something like that? And so we actually decided on, wait for it, Putrefy.
That was an extended card.
That's a 3-mana removal spell, no?
Yeah, that was like an extended staple, but
yeah. So, but we needed instant speed removal that was not one hit artifacts and creatures, and that was the only one at the time that kind of fit the bill. Besides playing, say, just Ancient Grudge, right? But we wanted to be able to hit creatures as well, in case.
I'm actually trying to think back. There's really nothing that actually would do that. Yeah.
No. So we really, like, again, we were training like 3 to 4 times a week, like going through testing. Like that was probably the time that we were doing, I would say, the most rigorous testing, where somebody would sit there on each side of the game and coach each player of like, if mistakes were like watching the game. So it's not just you playing, it was somebody else watching you. And then at the end being like, okay, well, here's where you could have played better. You should have done this, should have done that, etc. So that Aggro Loam deck was I won quite a few like local tournaments with that. And I was like, okay, but am I ready to bring it to GP Providence? And I was not confident enough in myself to bring it to the tournament. So I ended up playing regular junk and I didn't make day 2. I still did okay. I ended up positive. Because Persian's Deed is still a card, and Thrun was still a card, and all these
Thrun
things.
was another really good card back then. Yeah,
so
it was the bane of some of these decks.
Yeah,
so that's part of why they played their mass removal, like Perish, right?
Exactly.
Regenerate through Perish.
And it was just funny. I remember playing against some guy playing like blue-red land still at the tournament, and he was playing Nevinrul's Disc, and he's like, okay, I blow disc. Do you have any responses? And I'm like, okay, well, I'm obviously going to regenerate. And then he's like, well, when are you going to pay the regenerate cost? I'm like, oh, fuck you.
Oh, come on, dude.
And I'm like, Judge, how does regenerate work nowadays? It's been a while. And he's like, well, it forms a bubble of protection. So I'm like, okay, so if I do it before the bubble's still there, he's like, yes. And he's like, and the other guy's like, packs up his cards. Bullshit. But I remember playing against Affinity in round 1. Or it was round 2, I can't remember. I think it was round 1, Affinity. And I'm like the deck with like 3 Pernicious Deeds and swords. And I was just like, oh, I feel so bad for you. Oh my god.
Oh, there were some people who, like, even going back to the Shards of Alara Revolution, right? There were people who were playing like Master of Ethereum, if I remember correctly.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It was the Lord for Affinity basically back then. Oh yeah. Yeah.
So anyway, I think James Sue went day 2 with Zoo. James Onions, I can't remember.
James did not day 2 because
No. Or close. He was getting close
to know that. Not that James is a bad player, but I know that it was always a goal for him.
Okay. So I remember there was a time in the tournament though where he was like,
cut that. That's just like so useless information. Just
I'm doing
I love
well.
You, James.
But I think one of my biggest Magic regrets at the time was like just not having the confidence to play that Aggro Loam deck at that time, because that deck like did very well against, like, it wasn't really good against Rug Order, but it was pretty good against Landstill, and it was pretty good against Stoneblade. And it did okay. And you still played Burning Wish, and you would go get like Worm Harvest. Like, it was just, I'm actually rebuilding that deck right now just to have built so I can look at it, because it's just like, that was a good time. But
I
overall,
kind of feel the same about Rug Order. I think we're kind of nostalgic for that era, even though like we're not. But like for those decks, yeah, kind of.
Yeah, it's just like
it
the
almost
time.
felt like playing Standard.
Yeah, it was a really good time. I'm still glad that they removed Mental Misstep, because the format was becoming misstep your misstep, so you can misstep while you misstep, which is fine. But
it just meant that a lot of times both players basically took a forced mulligan, right? Because like the game would start out, you would trade your missteps, and then all of a sudden, like you played a land, you had like 5 cards. Just like the gameplay in that regard suffered, and like you don't really want a meta game where people try to play Maverick, but then they have these weird 4 mental missteps, and it's just like. It's not how you want good gameplay.
Exactly. It's like, well, if it's going in every deck, then maybe it should be a no deck, I guess was the kind of the thought process. But Gitaxian Probe was still a problem, in my opinion. Like, so anyway, that gets dealt with later.
But it wasn't a problem at the time, but that's for later.
Later, yeah. So overall, Mental Misstep era, very interesting time to play. And like you said, like a fever dream of like this weird, like, it was like a Shahrazad game from the rest of the format. You know?
Sure, yeah, that's a
Shahrazad, or however it's
yeah, that's a really good way to put it, dude. You're like a poet.
There we go.
Sometimes, yeah.
Sometimes.
Cool. But yeah, that's the end of the Mental Misstep Interlude. Just 5 months, but very influential for Legacy. Brought about a bunch of new decks. Also taught us what it means to slow down the format, how gameplay changes, even if you just slow it down. Well, I say just by a turn. Like by a turn is a lot. Like we sometimes think in like half turns or something, but like slowing the whole format down by a turn, it brought about these really beautiful decks. But overall, Mental Misstep eventually had to go. They called it quits on September 2011, right before the third Legacy GP in Europe at the time in Amsterdam. And for as much as I was like clueless about what to play at that GP, because towards the very tail end of the Mental Misstep era, Time Spiral was unbanned, and I played Time Spiral combo together with a friend of mine, Mark Vogt. And we were ready to run that deck into the GP, but then the ban happened. And for as much as I hated that at the moment, it kind of like led me to the deck that to this day I love the most. People associate me with elves, and I love elves. But there's one deck I love more, and that's Green White Maverick. And that deck was only really fully brought about after the ban of Mental Misstep, as we had into what, looking back, a lot of people consider the golden age of Legacy from 2011 to 2012-13. That was like 2 years. I kind of feel the same, even though I'm also like very partial to, like we talked about, the whole Alara shakeup, like what the metagame was back then. But that quote unquote golden age of Legacy, that's something that we're going to talk about in the next episode. Matt, I hope we're going to be able to have you back for that one.
Yeah,
Kai,
I'll be back.
I think we both will have a lot to say about that time because that was one of the biggest, most important times for Legacy back then. I'm also really excited to hear about what you were doing back then, because I think like that was the time where you were shaping up to be like a really good player as well, right?
Think so. Like I think like the early years, like especially like 2004 to 2009 or so, I just didn't play the format, right? Like it was really interesting to hear about like all these like different decks and archetypes and like why certain cards were problems and so on. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to the next episode, because like this is probably like where I can probably contribute a little more to like what happened, because this was like always like the Star City games. Like you watch coverage every Sunday kind of time. You read a lot of articles and stuff. So
yeah, it was a really great time. What I also like about why people sometimes call this the golden age of Legacy, this is not completely nostalgia driven or blind, right? A lot of us, we had been playing for like 5-6 years at that point. It's not like, a lot of times like the first way you discover something, that's the one you love. That's the one you always want to go back to. No, this is like halfway through the life cycle of Legacy, almost like I guess by now it's more like a third or fourth. But once people started calling this the golden age of Legacy, it was like halfway through the history of the format. And we'll talk a lot about that on the next episode. I think we'll figure out when we're going to release that one, because I'm going to Kenya on the 20th of March. Guys, we're going to coordinate with that. Everybody, thank you so much for tuning in. Let us know, especially on Discord, what are your early stories, especially about like Prehistoric Legacy, or whenever you started playing, which decks did you play? What did we get completely wrong? Or like, in what ways were your experiences on metagame entirely different? Like, really excited to hear about that one, because dude, if I think back, like to close this out, about what I thought Legacy was like, I thought back then when I started playing 2006, Legacy, that's where everybody plays Landstill, and then the other half of the room is trying to beat Landstill. And as it turned out, and as GPs have shown us, like Landstill, really not a very good deck, but I would have never thought so. So everybody, thank you so much. It was exciting to have you back, Matt. I think you have to head to work now.
Unfortunately, there's some teeth that need to get drilled.
Yeah, I guess that's what pays the bills for your exquisite pre-modern habits. How many more Ravenous threads are gonna show up?
There's another 5 that are stuck in Switzerland somewhere, so we'll see. We'll wait.
Yeah, I know Matt has ordered like 30 copies of the card to my house, and they just keep coming. I don't know what's going on there. But yeah, thank you so much, everybody, and see you again next time. Bye-bye.
See you guys.